location. There are perhaps 7 countries in the world that are involved in supplying the aircraft industry, and they include countries like Canada, Brazil, Russia is very, very active, and China. And if you look at that spectrum, Spain, Sweden, there's a variety of different profiles for political situation, let's say, in those countries. And so as you do business, as you're supplying into those countries or you're supplying out of those countries, there's a very different risk profile associated with the potential for corruption. And that is a very, very important consideration for a values-based company. Most companies are very concerned about the cost of doing business, and the cost of doing business, of course, includes the potential risk associated with corruption. We've been doing business for many, many years in Africa. We have mines in Ghana, where we mine bauxite. And some of you may know there was a political coup not too long ago there. So this is the kind of consideration I think is, we perhaps are in the extreme end being involved in the mineral business, but this is a very valid consideration when you're doing business with either sourcing or actually selling to countries that are very far from.
Just to add a brief comment to what the other panelists mentioned, I think the risk assessment of like where you're buying and how you're buying it is one thing. The political basic risk that going to different parts of the world presents as another item. But at the same time, figuring out if what you're buying from a certain location is compatible with where you're basically exporting your product, or compatible with the region that you're going to have your product operational in, is very basically important as well. For our case with Combustion Associates, we develop distributed power generation packages. So a lot of times we buy items, it's way cheaper for us. The total cost of ownership for the materials that we're buying would be way cheaper if we go and source it from China or source it from somewhere in Eastern Europe. But depends on where we're going with our power projects. Sometimes it's impossible for us to source it. Now, like finding a way around it, it puts the whole project at risk if we buy something from a source that we're not allowed to. And sometimes you run into the problem that you have a current existing part on a package which was okay till like 3 months ago. Now, due to any political changes or new basically risk introduced in the global supply chain market or in the world, now you're not allowed to have that on the package and ship it to a certain country. So I think that's just like, to emphasize on the political aspect and the risk management aspect of the global supply chain. I just wanted to add this point and basically provide just a simple example of what we are dealing with in our own market.
All right, well, so let's see here. For the folks that are looking at materials, what variables drive your decision to source raw materials globally?
I guess I could start since we're involved in materials. So I could tell you a story about that. About 15 years ago, we got on the bandwagon of saying, okay, everybody's going to China, we should be in China, we should open a facility in China, we should be sourcing materials from China. So we did. We set up a facility outside of Shanghai, some of you may know a town called Shenzhou. And we built the factory there, and we took experts from North America, moved them there, set up that facility. And looking back, and you look at the investment that we've made there, it's really been somewhat disappointing in some ways, but also a big learning experience that's important for us. In terms of looking at China as a cost of low-cost materials and labor, it hasn't panned out. It hasn't worked out. After 15 years or so, we look back and we go, it really wasn't a smart investment from that perspective. Contrast that to an investment we made in Mexico. We have a facility in Acuña, which is just south of Del Rio, actually making the same parts we're making in China. And that has grown 3 times the rate of the Chinese facility. The labor cost has been higher, but it's been more stable. And so a lot lower risk associated with the escalation of labor, and a lot simpler to transfer goods from Mexico than from China. So looking back at that and comparing China to Mexico, we've learned a lot there. We now value, I think, the proximity of being close to our customers. So this is, I think, an important consideration that we've learned is. However, I would point out the silver lining in the experience in China. Over the past 15 years, we start out saying, well, China is a low-cost source, and while it hasn't panned out that way for us as well as we expected, China has emerged as a good customer. So we have now the Shanghai Aircraft Institute designing new aircraft that will compete with Boeing. And we've developed a close alliance with the Shanghai Aircraft Institute. It just so happens that we had a facility there. We went there for a different reason, but because we were there now, we suddenly were viewed as the local supplier. So oddly enough, now we're a local supplier in China to a competitor of a North American company. So that's the silver lining in that experience.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of changes where we're following the demand. In today's world, it's an Amazon impacted world. Everybody wants everything yesterday. So anyway, who else would like to talk about this topic?
I'll add a story to it from Mexico. Iron ore is an essential raw material used in a lot of stuff. The Chinese were the biggest importers of iron ore, and they were sourcing it all over the world, and they were looking for long-term deals. Today, well, you've got iron ore on the strength of China continuing to import those mass quantities is losing a lot of money, and that included some big companies who bet big on that trend continuing. But if you wanted to get into it and you started looking for opportunities where you could get it at low cost, have a higher markup, you might have been drawn to places like Mexico or Chile, where you had a lot of small producers. And all they seemed to need was some money. And then you go down there and you look at it and say, yeah, okay, there's production, but they have no idea how to manage their cash flow. So all you have to do is put in some money, make sure their workers are paid, and don't walk off the job every other day because they're not. And we've got a long-term source of supply, and we'll take care of that. Well, it's not that easy. In Mexico, for example, you have on the West Coast, a lot of these small producers, and in fact, with the cash and some improvements in their operations, they could really be a nice source of supply. Well, that's just the start of it, because you have to get it to the port. But if you get it to the port, you've got to make a deal with the bad guys because they control all the transportation. And if you don't make a deal with the bad guys and you try to do it on your own, they'll just seize your trucks. And of course, you're not going to get that back. If you do manage to make a deal with the bad guys and you get it to the port, you're still not finished, because a couple of the ports, and at least until recently, were also corrupt. And so you had to make another deal just to be able to load your iron ore onto a ship and have some expectation that it would leave port. So you have to look at your all-in costs and all the problems that you may need to solve, not just the matter of who's going to produce the particular supply for you. And you can take that and apply it to a whole lot of other types of raw materials in a lot of other countries. So you're right about corruption being a problem that you could never overlook, but that's just one of the supply chain issues beyond production that you may also have to solve before you're going to feel comfortable with a long-term relationship.
Much of what we source internationally is because it's not available in the U.S. and we use a lot of APIs, which stands for active pharmaceutical ingredients, and In the US, 80% of the APIs that are used in manufacture come from international sources. So in our company, we actually have pretty close to 100% comes from international sources, and again, it's because it's not available locally. Another example of that same reason is glass bottles. There are certain solutions we make, and it's not compatible with plastic. We make it in glass bottles still. And we used to source them domestically, and now you cannot get a pharmaceutical-grade glass bottle produced in the U.S. All of the U.S. Glassware manufacturers are making beer bottles and perfume bottles, and pharmaceutical-grade glassware is a lot more finicky. The customers are, we need it to be a little more exact. So there are no U.S. Bottle makers that make pharmaceutical bottles. So we were forced to move globally for even that, which is very expensive to ship. So and there are other reasons in the past that you learn over time are not as desirable, because ultimately you may have to move, which is very expensive. But years ago, we had a plant that made a lot of manual labor produced products in Puerto Rico, because there were a lot of tax advantages to that. And when those tax advantages went away, labor costs weren't cheaper, so we wound up moving that facility to Dominican Republic, and again, it's very manual, labor intensive, and now we have that plant in Dominican Republic. So, at some time in the future, we may find reasons why that isn't compatible, but that's typically we're not doing it for cost reasons, because they typically don't pan out in the long run.
So, Elizabeth, what do you see in terms of the trends happening from a global trade perspective? In terms of what's on the water, are you seeing? I know that, for example, there's lots bigger ships now. What types of things are you seeing? Because we're not in your world, so it'd be good to know.
I get to play with all the big toys, the ships, the trains, all the fun stuff, and the containers. Well, Lisa, you're absolutely right. The ships are getting larger. Now at the ports of LA and Long Beach both, back in December, we had the largest ships to ever call in the United States come to each port within a couple of weeks of each other. The Benjamin Franklin with the CMA CGM shipping line, that ship holds 18,000 TEUs. And I'm going to make an assumption that everybody here knows what a TEU is.
You probably shouldn't.
No. You're on supply chain, so a TEU is a 20-foot equivalent. So most containers nowadays are 40 foot, so that would be 2 TEUs. So when the ship says it has 18,000 TEUs, it probably has around 9,000 or so actual containers on it. But when I started working in this industry 22 years ago, our average size ships were 5,000 to 7,000 TEUs. Every couple of years, that has gone up to where back then we thought that a 10,000 TEU ship was unbelievably large. We didn't think, how in the world are we ever going to handle a 10,000 TEU ship? Now we have 18,000 TEUs that are actually calling here, and they're going. We have ships, ships on order up to 20,000 TEUs on the books right now. So they're getting larger and larger, but there's only so many ports that can actually handle those, and those are also what they call post-Panamax. They're too big even for the expanded Panama Canal. The expanded Panama Canal can only handle about 14,000 TEU ships. So the Panama Canal has not become the competitor that we thought it would be, because those ships now are calling here and can't go through the Panama Canal. But it brings a whole new set of challenges to the West Coast ports. We've got LA, Long Beach, Oakland, and Seattle that can handle those ships, but it's overcapacity. The ships are too large. The rates are going down as far as the cost. So we've had bankruptcies with the Hanjin shipping line last month. There's going to be more bankruptcies in the future. And I could talk just on those issues for an hour or more, so I won't, but we'll have time for questions. But, I mean, when it comes to the actual ships, where they're gonna go, how they're gonna get there, and then how we're gonna discharge them, there's a lot of moving parts.
That's why the global supply chain is so complex, and it's a vast topic. All right, so let's see. Another question that I have here would be for Luke, with vast operations dispersed around the globe, what unique challenges do you face, and what solutions have been adopted? Now, it could be for others too, if you have something to say on this topic. I find many times that happens.
Okay, so just as a background, Alcoa is now, I think this year we're 128 years old. And the company was founded on the process of making aluminum from bauxite by some students, by the way. So it was a student project that turned into an industry. So the industry has been around since, before the automobile industry and the aerospace industry, so 1888. So, but half of the company is an integrated company, so that means we are mining ore, we're transferring that bauxite material into alumina,